Hello, O365 followers. On today's episode, we're going to cover notes from the field, how to reuse SIP-compatible VoIP phones in Microsoft Teams to support extension dialing. So this is going to be a how-to episode on configuring this. There are tons of SIP-compatible devices used by hundreds of thousands of Microsoft Teams users, and it can be a challenge to configure it to support extension dialing. So Dino's going to walk us through the scenario, the prerequisites, how to configure it all. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dino. I don't know if you want to just say a few words about the type of scenario that you're going to walk through and how this how-to will benefit deployments.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Kurt. So recently, I just had a bunch of customers actually come up with this scenario that, more of a requirement that they're using, VoIP compatible phones today. And, they want to continue using these devices when they move to Teams. So really the use case, a couple of customers, most recently, education, manufacturing. So think about like school boards, manufacturing shop floors. In this case, both of these entities were using Poly VVX series phones, but as you'll see, there's a number of different supported devices. And all they used these devices for was just basic, 4-digit or 5-digit dialing between classrooms or from one area on the shop floor to a different area, maybe the office. And they were using, legacy VoIP providers. So it wasn't like these were turnkey solutions. They're already VoIP systems, but in this case, both of these organizations wanted to move to Teams. And the ask was, can we move to Teams and continue using these devices and continue with the same, more importantly, dialing patterns that they were used to doing before? So minimal disruption to the users. The phone stays the same, except now it's signed into Teams and allows you to do a 4-digit dial or 5-digit dial. So, in this case, there's no advanced calling capabilities required, no lookups from the phones. They just want to be able to, calendaring. They just want to be able to pick up the device and dial a 4 or 5-digit extension. So I'm going to walk through how this works. This scenario fits nicely into shared calling, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But it's not explicitly required unless there's a particular Teams phone deployment that we'll talk about. So just let's quickly review what SIP Gateway is. So lets you use a SIP compatible device with Microsoft Teams, allowing you to preserve those investments that you previously made. So here I've got, Poly VVX phones, now owned by HP, Cisco, Yealink, and AudioCodes phones. So these are like somewhat still relevant in modern devices. So in the case of the VVX, they've probably been around almost, I don't know, say 15 years, maybe even longer, but they still work very well and they're still fully supported. So all of these devices, and there's more, there's a full list of them at the Microsoft Learn site. But here are just a few of the examples. And in terms of what SIP Gateway allows you to do, you can, full list here, but basically basic calling features. So making and receiving calls, transferring, forwarding, support simultaneous calls, support for DTMF, muting, unmuting, accessing your voicemail. So all the basic features that most users, the majority of users, are going to need. In most cases, to be honest, users are just using these devices to make and receive calls. It's actually rare that I see anybody accessing voicemail or doing these things. Or usually when they're on a shop floor, it's just, I need to be able to make a call to somebody else using by picking up the phone and dialing somebody. So in terms of the setup, in Teams, you have to turn on the ability to do SIP calling. It's off by default. So that's a calling policy and TAC that you need to enable. So you can either turn it on under calling policies or under global. If you don't want to do that for some reason, you create a user level policy and enable it. There's a great playbook that you can download. It's like 170 pages of goodness that talks about how to enable what you need to do in terms of the next steps for all the different phones. It's 170 pages, and it talks about all the supported devices. If you literally Bing or Google the enablement migration playbook, you'll find that. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks, Dino. Just a quick question, and I'm forgetting, so maybe our listeners will want to know. The SIP Gateway, that is a software service hosted by Microsoft?
Yeah, it is. So the SIP Gateway's been around since, in fact, it arguably was there from the Skype days. They just enabled it to allow support for these existing the devices that previously worked on Skype. So they continued supporting it, and it's just a cloud-based service that's available to anybody running Teams phone.
Great.
Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that playbook. It's like buried pretty far in the learn pages because it was around the whole like Skype migration documentation. But yeah, it's by far the best resource around getting SIP Gateway working. And unfortunately, all that content's hidden in a PowerPoint that is in like an IT admin migration link. But yeah, like you mentioned, that is probably the easiest guide to use, even better than the learn pages of going through all the prerequisites to get SIP Gateway going and all the nuances. And then a lot of the like preview devices and the processes to get those individual manufacturer devices connected to the SIP Gateway are also listed there, and all the kind of the tips and nuances for each vendor.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, the Avaya J179 phone is listed in this playbook, but is not called out anywhere on the learn pages. And you know, in a conversation with product management at Microsoft, they said, yeah, that's still a preview device. So although it does work, so have a look at that guide. I think you're best served by downloading it. Literally, just Google or Bing SIP Gateway Enablement and Migration Playbook, and you'll find a reference to download it on the Learn pages. I almost can't find it any other way, so that's why I saved that terminology and called it out here. So just moving along here, in terms of the setup, it's actually fairly simple for most of these devices. And for the Poly, depending on what region you're in, you're going to pick one of these three URLs, and you're going to sign into the phone, and you'll see a provisioning server URL. And again, this playbook for each model will screenshot and tell you exactly where you have to go to set this up. So, you know, I'm in North America, so I'm going to use that second URL there and basically find the provisioning server URL on the device and just add that. You can do this with DHCP too, and again, the playbook will tell you the specific option the phone supports. So you could deploy this at mass or at scale for multiple devices. But you know, when testing this out, you probably just want to test a couple of devices. You can just manually assign this provisioning URL. Factory reset's your friend here. So typically with devices, you want to clean out whatever configurations on there. If it's not working, I would suggest just doing a quick factory reset on it. And once you put that single provisioning server URL change to the device, it's going to go through a bunch of reboots and come up and provision itself from Microsoft. So if you've done everything correctly, you'll see here's a screenshot of my VVX phone. You should see the Teams logo on it, and obviously it's ready to be signed in. So when you've done everything correctly, this is after several reboots, you'll see the sign-in screen with the Teams logo. And it's literally that simple on most of these devices. Go ahead, Ab.
Yeah, Dino, so when we're getting into like the sign-in process, you know, from your experience, are you finding a lot of these devices through the SIP Gateway are generally used for common area phones, or is it like, or end users still, you know, using and adopting these kind of devices?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the majority are common area phones. In this case, like a classroom phone is going to be treated like a shared device. So, you know, you still need to create an account like you would for a regular user, except you're provisioning it with the shared device license. You could use it for a named user. Absolutely. If there's no reason why you wouldn't or you couldn't. So, but either way, but I would say 90% of the time it's going to be some sort of shared device. So think of like if you had 20 classrooms in a small school board or school, you would have classroom 1, 2, 3, or whatever you want to call them. You'd still need to set up those accounts for those rooms.
Oh, for sure. I was just wondering, like, is it more around like the feature set that, these are more geared to more common area or end user side?
Yeah, I think common area, anecdotally speaking, there may be other organizations out there that, and this is something I see even with first party Teams phones. It's more and more organizations are not acquiring these devices because they're expensive, first of all. For users, it's more, they're necessary evil for shared areas like a courtesy area, a kitchen, maybe raised floor environments where you just need to have phones so you can dial 911, that type of thing. So I would say, yeah, it's probably more of a common area phone type requirement for sure.
Awesome.
So the phone's ready to sign in at this point. We haven't done anything on the user end, so we need to, let's just quickly review what you got to do from a user perspective. So in the Teams Admin Center, I'm not showing the full picture here, but obviously we've created a user and where I'm assuming that you've licensed the user, they have Teams phone available to them, whatever license you need for that to enable the Teams phone functionality. But the key part here is we're using the phone number type of direct routing, and you're going to see, you're going to assign them a phone number and an extension here. So the phone number is usually associated with an auto attendant, so your main line, for example. So that could be the common baseline number that I call it, and then you would have a bunch of extensions here. In this case, we're configuring it with 1002.
Does it work with like any of the other models as well, like calling plans or operator connect or?
Yeah, so if under direct routing, this has always kind of worked. This is nothing new, but if you were, what's new here is with shared calling, you could enable this scenario under calling plans and operator connect, because prior to the shared calling, you had to give everybody a DID to make and receive phone calls. Gotcha. So if you wanted these phones to be able to, if you had calling plans and you set up shared calling, you'll see under the guidance for shared calling, you can still do extension-based dialing and follow this exact guidance, and those phones would still function because they're hiding behind an auto attendant that's enabled for calling plans or operator connect. They'll be able to make an outbound call, for example. But honestly, the use case here is mostly for internal calling that I'm seeing. So in this case, I'm extension 1002. I want to call extension 1003 or 1009. It's, that's going to be for internal calling. So you'll see we've set up a user and we've given it this extension. In order to make this actually work, we need to set up a dial plan as well that normalizes to E164. So this just says, hey, create, let me dial 4 digits and then normalize it to that base number. So when I dial 1002, you can see the number fully normalized at the bottom here. And you're going to get this full E164 number that matches the user that we just set up here. And that's a pretty key concept. Without doing this 4-digit dialing doesn't work. Like Teams just doesn't know what to do with dialing a 4-digit out of the box. It knows how to deal with 10-digit dialing and international calls, that type of thing, but not 4-digit dialing. So this is a critical step to make this work. So we've done that piece, and we go back to the phone and we're ready to sign in. You hit the sign in button, you get this kind of pairing code, and it's prompting you to go to ak.ms/SIP login, and it'll give you the pair code. And all you need to do at that point is open up a browser, authenticate using Modern Auth, and put that pair code in. Go ahead, Michael.
Just going to flag the any scenario within Office 365 where you have a URL and a code for remote sign-on is going to be impacted in the near future because Microsoft is pushing out a Microsoft managed conditional access policy to all tenants that is managing device code flow. And this is that scenario of getting a code on one session, going to a browser and signing into that. So the recommendation on the Microsoft side is to exclude the accounts that need to be able to do this. So if this is a common area phone, then you just take that common area account and you exclude it in that device code flow policy. But just out of the box, you expect this to work. But I know a few customers that got hit with it last week being activated the policy. Different tenants don't see it yet. Some are still report only. But yeah, this policy started going live in some of our customer tenants last week of blocking this workflow, and they had to put some exclusions in.
Yeah, it's a good call out. And normally, I think a lot of customers think it only applies to Android Teams phones, but the whole device, what you're seeing here is device code flow. It's basically a code you get on a phone and you're signing into a browser to sign in. And you might think there is a security vulnerability that the Azure team is trying to, I don't know if it's a vulnerability, I think
it ties to like phishing. Like people can try and fish people to put this code into a browser, and then it's actually giving your token away to the other service. Right. I know PowerShell does this a lot when you're trying to authenticate to some of the PowerShell modules, or if you're using like Cloud Shell where you can't have an interactive sign-in. There's a lot of different areas, but it impacts Teams devices probably the most.
For sure, and unlike an Android phone, which you have the choice to sign in as the user by typing on the keyboard, you don't have any option on these devices other than to use device code flow. So the only way to get around it is to do that exemption you're talking about, unless Microsoft makes some changes to the SIP gateway that we're unaware of. But for now, just make sure you have an exemption in place so that you can make sure that this works. And you quickly know if this doesn't work because you'll get some sort of error when you try to sign in. So once you've done this, and if you have no conditional access policies blocking you, then you should see the phone probably reboot a couple of times and then come up to a screen like this where it shows that full E164 number here, that there's that base number that we used and then the extension. So the VBX, this is a VBX 500. It's got a nice screen on it. So it'll show the actual full number with the extension. On some of the phones have smaller screens, it truncates the number, so it's not as clean. So your mileage may vary with that. So just test it out. You're welcome to sign directly into the phone, and you can change the display name so it appears more meaningful to the user, and you can change that display name just to extension 1002 or 1002 if you wanted. But some of the higher end VDX models will display like this and show you everything. And you can see you've got some buttons by default: the do not disturb, voicemail, recent call list. You can sign out, and then the call forwarding button. Go ahead, Michael.
We've had some customers request to hide the sign out on those common area phones. And so you can, in the device manufacturer's web admin, you can hide some of those soft key options or those navigation key options like the sign out.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention that's a good call out is Poly offers something called Lens, which is their provisioning service in the cloud. And they used to have it as an on-prem product called Real Presence Provisioning Manager, RPRM. Now they've moved that whole thing to the cloud. It's called Lens, and it's free. So the basic version, you just sign up with a Microsoft tenant account. You can help provision these devices at scale. So if you had hundreds of these, you don't want to be remoting into each of these phones and setting that provisioning server URL. So they have a basic wizard you can follow in there and turn on the Microsoft assisted sign in. And if you push the DHCP options out that points it to this device, then you can literally capture hundreds of phones and make this a little bit easier. So if you're happen to using Poly, a lot of the other manufacturers do have provisioning services as well. So again, the SIP playbook will be your friend there in terms of using those devices, using those services. So that's it. So hopefully that was useful to you. We'll post some of these resources on the podcast website, so you can make reference to the playbook and some of the other Microsoft Learn documentation that might be useful to you.
That sounds great. And Dino, can you clarify, like, if you're using calling plans or Operator Connect, you'll want to leverage the shared calling to take advantage of this configuration, right?
That's right. So, if you're using direct routing or direct routing as a service, basically you follow this process and it all just works. But if you were using Operator Connect or calling plan, you would, for that base number for your auto attendant, you would set up shared calling and a shared calling policy so that users behind, essentially hiding behind this auto attendant could still potentially make an outbound call. If you had shared calling and Operator Connect and you set this up and you didn't set up shared calling, for example, the phones would be able to work internally, but they wouldn't be able to make an outbound call. So ideally, that's probably not very good. If you obviously things with a phone, you'd want to be able to make a 911 call. So you can. That support came out for shared calling back in January of 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of quietly introduced as a function of shared calling, as you can do extension dialing. But really, again, this was always available under direct routing, but what it really exposed was the ability to do this for calling plans and Operator Connect under shared calling. So again, it's something a few of my clients are finding very useful. They don't have to go and acquire net new capital in terms of the phone, spending capital on these phones. So and users, more importantly, there's zero, other than a slight difference in display on the phone, the users just continue to pick up the phone and dial the numbers that they were used to calling, and supporting that in Teams.
No, that's great. Super useful. And like you said, cost savings if you don't have to deploy new devices to do this. So that's great.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for walking us through that, Dino. That was great. And we'll catch everyone on the next episode. Thanks.